Let's talk about Amit Shah. As India's Home Minister, he's easily one of the most powerful and talked about figures in the entire country. And for a lot of people, he's seen as the heir apparent, the natural successor to the Prime Minister. So how does his record actually stack up? We're going to break it all down.
So here's the big question, right? How do we even begin to grade his time in office? Has it been a story of bold, decisive successes? Or has it been marked by some pretty serious failures in managing major crises? We're going to dive into the key moments, starting with the one that really set the tone for everything that followed.
And wow, what a beginning it was! I mean, right out of the gate, his first major move was a huge one, the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir. This was something that had been on his party's wish list for decades, but was always seen as, just too controversial to actually touch.
Okay, now look at this timeline. What's absolutely wild is just how fast this all happened. He takes office, and just 2 months later, bam, the resolution is passed. The government's planning was so detailed that they managed to keep a lid on most of the potential unrest. And then, years down the line, the Supreme Court came in and gave it that final legal seal of approval.
But this right here, this gets to the heart of the whole debate. On one hand, legally, it was a success. The highest court in the land said so. But on the other hand, the way it was done, well, that's still fiercely debated. We're talking house arrests, shutting down the internet, and detaining the entire political leadership of a state. Those actions raise some serious moral questions that are still being talked about today.
But that early win, well, it was quickly followed by a series of massive challenges that would test his leadership in a completely different way. It wasn't long before huge protests began to pop up, bringing parts of the country to a standstill.
It all kicked off with the Citizenship Amendment Act, the CAA. Now, whatever the government intended, the story that spread was a different one, and it led to these massive, nationwide protests. Shaheen Bagh in Delhi became the symbol of the whole movement, with a blockade that went on for months. But all that simmering tension, it eventually just exploded.
And what happened next was just tragic. The Delhi riots in 2020 left more than 50 people dead and hundreds injured. And since law and order in the capital falls directly under the Home Minister, this is seen as the first major failure of his tenure. What made it look even worse was that it all happened while the U.S. president was visiting.
You see, a key problem here was the government struggled to really control the narrative and explain what the CAA was all about. And according to our source material, this wasn't just a one-time thing. A very similar script was about to play out again, but this time on an even bigger stage. Which brings us to the farm law protests. The government introduced 3 new agricultural laws, and it sparked these huge protests, mostly from farmers in the north. And they used a similar playbook to Shaheen Bagh, blocking the main roads into Delhi for over a year. Again, the government had a hard time getting its message across, and in the end, the whole standoff ended with a complete reversal. The laws were taken back. And listen to this quote from Rakesh Tikade, one of the protest leaders. It's really telling. It suggests that even if it started out differently, the end goal became political. It was about putting pressure on the government, maybe even shaking it up. For the Home Ministry, letting things get to that point was seen as another huge failure.
So, on top of all those high-profile protests, his time in office has also seen these really serious, ongoing problems with law and order in some of India's most sensitive border states.
And when you look at the map, it's pretty worrying. In Manipur, ethnic clashes just exploded into something that looked a lot like a civil war, with over 250 people killed. Then you've got West Bengal, which has been just riddled with political violence. We're talking hundreds of incidents. And even in Kashmir, after Article 370 was removed, a new wave of terror attacks has cropped up.
You want to know what's really striking about the Manipur crisis? This number right here, 20. The government waited 20 months before stepping in and taking direct control. That delay brought a ton of heavy criticism. Okay, so far, the report card doesn't look great, right? But hold on, that's only half the story. Let's flip the page and look at what our sources call some huge, undeniable wins on the internal security front.
And honestly, the scale of this first one is just mind-blowing. Think about it. For decades, the Naxal insurgency, the Red Corridor, stretched all the way from Pashupati to Tirupati, hitting 182 districts. Today, that number has been crushed down to just 18. Getting rid of left-wing extremism on this scale is without a doubt one of India's biggest internal security victories in a long, long time.
And it doesn't stop there. There's been a relentless campaign to bring insurgent groups in the Northeast to the peace table, leading to thousands of militants surrendering. And at the same time, his ministry has really clamped down on foreign funding for NGOs that have been accused of pushing outside agendas. It's another piece of his whole internal security strategy.
So you've got these massive public order failures on one side and these huge security wins on the other. It's a total contradiction. So how do you even begin to make sense of a legacy like that? Let's try to tally up the final score.
So here it is, the final balance sheet. In one column, you have these truly legacy-defining moves, like Article 370, and basically wiping out Naxalism. But on the other side of the ledger, you have these really profound failures, the chaotic response to protests in the capital, the devastating crisis in Manipur, and the nonstop political violence in other areas.
And that brings us right back to where we started. So what's the verdict on Amit Shah's tenure? Is it defined by its audacious, game-changing successes, or by its critical, catastrophic failures? The evidence is complicated, and the final answer probably depends on which one of those columns you believe matters more for India's future.